Hello. Hi, Rebecca. Can you hear me? Rebecca?
Yep, that seems clear, sorry.
I just Googled what I thought the issue might be. So someone might have like multiple recordings on. So I'm going to let people in.
Yeah, there's no feedback now, so.
Okay. Hello, Frank. Frank? Hello. Hi, Frank.
Hello.
No feedback with you. Okay, I'm trying it one at a time because I was Googling, I very quickly Googled Zoom issues and they said it could be on your end. So we'll just do a little troubleshooting here. And then I get to meet everybody one by one. James. Hello, James. Okay, I'm gonna try. Carla. Hello. Hi, Carla. Hi, James. We're good so far.
Hello.
Everybody's good. Okay, I'm doing one by one, so make sure we're on a good path.
Hi there.
Hi there. Hi, Carla. Great profile pic. Okay, and then Jawanda, I'm gonna let you in. And then I think, does that sound good to everybody? Everybody's on who's on mute. If someone clicks back, so I don't hear myself either. Yay, we did it. Okay, that's exciting. All right, well, we'll get started because I want all of your questions to be answered. I want you all to feel like you're getting, what you came here for today. We're going to talk all about being a staff writer, how to get there, how to move up, how to navigate this wild business, which I love more than anything, and I'm hoping we will get back to doing shortly. They're in talks now. We don't get excited over here. We just, keep our optimism. So before we go, I'll give a little talk about who I am, what I do, how I got there. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process of becoming a staff writer. And then I'll open it up for questions because I feel like that's most helpful for all of you. So my name again is Hollie Overton. I'm a co-executive producer of the CW Netflix drama All American Homecoming, which lovely news we got about a month ago, which is that we are coming back for a third season. I broke my curse. I had a 2-year curse for shows. I was only doing 2 years. So I've officially broken the curse. I'm also a published novelist. I've written 3 thrillers that have all been published by major publishers, and I'm currently at work on my 4th, which is due to my publishers in February. So yes, there's a strike, but I also have to write a book. I'm also the mother of 2.5-year-old identical triplets. So yeah, so my life is wild, and I think the universe, I used to be like, I hope I don't run out of things to write about, and the universe was like, well, hold on, we've got you. So I've learned a lot about navigating, other responsibilities, motherhood, jobs, life. To start, I always wanted to be an actor. That was really the dream originally. I grew up in a small town in Texas that you've never heard of, and I moved to New York City for college, and then I'd been in New York working and waitressing and bartending, and my mom was like, I think you should move to LA. And I was like, I don't like LA. And she's like, what are you gonna do here? So I was like, all right, I guess I'll go give LA a try, which I didn't love LA initially. I've been here 18 years now, but I didn't love LA initially. And then I found my people and I started taking acting classes with a wonderful actor who recently passed, Brad Henke, who's been in Orange is the New Black. And but he was very big as an actor on also diversifying and writing and producing and not just being the one thing, which I think has become even more important over the last 10, 11 years since I've been doing this. So I was in his class and I'd always been a writer. I'd always been writing. I was, yearbook. I won awards as a kid. I took classes in New York. And right before I left New York, I started seriously screenwriting, really pursuing. There's a website called Trigger Street where people would post their, I don't know if it's still around, but post their work and get feedback, and a bunch of, let me admit someone. A bunch of really successful writers, really helpful writers, I should say. I don't know if they were successful, but they were very helpful. Oh, Amy, I think it might be yours because you're we're getting feedback from.
Oh, why is
'Cause
the sound even on? Sorry.
that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
How do I turn it off? I don't
Can
know.
you mute yourself?
Let's see.
Okay.
Delete it?
Yeah, that works. That works.
Did that worked? Okay.
Wait, no. No, I think you're still not muted. Maybe I can mute you. Okay, I can mute you. Okay. And then if Amy, if you have a question later, we'll work that out. So where was, so then I started writing. I took a class at UCLA Extension, which I'm a big fan of. And it was a class, it wasn't even how to write a TV script. It was like how to break story for TV for an existing show, which a current spec, which I'll talk about later too, which I wish more writers did who were writing for TV. But this obviously was years ago when they still wanted specs. And I was so fortunate to study with a writer named Bruce Miller, who is the Emmy Award-winning writer of The Handmaid's Tale. And he was, at the time, he had been on ER, Medium, a bunch of shows that I really loved. And he just made it so fun. I was like, if I get paid to do this, like the class was just so fun. He made us bring snacks because he's like, that's one of the best parts about being in a writer's room is all the snacks. And, but he really taught craft, right? And he taught us how to break a story. So in his class, I decided to write an episode of Friday Night Lights, which at the time was one of my favorite shows. And I ended up writing just an outline for that script. We just broke the story of it. And then the class was over and I went and I wrote the script on my own. And it was my first TV script. I'd written other not great features. And I'd been working with a writer who was like a big feature writer. I'd won a contest with him, which I'll talk more about contests too, which is another avenue that I still like. I don't love, but I like it. And so he was mentoring me and he was the one who was like, you should try TV because like, I like your features, but I just feel like you write these like very like, interesting character dramas that I think would transition well to TV. So that's why I took Bruce's class. So I wrote this script for Friday Night Lights. And I was like, the reason I love contests too is because it gives you a deadline. How long do you work on a script? I don't know. But if you have 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, and there's a big contest, then I write towards that, right? Like when I was starting out. So I entered the contest. I entered it in like ABC Disney Fellowship, the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop, and a bunch of other smaller contests. And I got into the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop, which is like, it's literally like, I want to play basketball. And then you get to the NBA. I was completely unprepared for it, like completely green. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know like certain terms. They'd be like, we're going to practice having a general meeting. I'm like, what's a general meeting? Like I was so green. But I had a lot of passion and I had a lot of like craft and understanding of story, which I think is, and something to say, right? Like, which is something else we'll talk about. And so I got into the program. It's an amazing program. It does not pay, but it's only 2 days a week or 1 to 2 days a week in the evenings after work. It no longer exists. They disbanded it this year, which is horrifying to me and all of us who came out of it, but hopefully something similar will be born from the ashes of whatever's happened now. But at the time, it was an amazing way for writers who didn't have any experience to get experience and to get a professional job. So I did that program. I got a manager and an agent. I signed with UTA out of the program. And then I got staffed on the television show Cold Case on the final season. That was, I'll talk more if you want to discuss it. I did not have a great experience on that show for some personal reasons, but also just the way the show was managed and run. It was a very stressful environment. And I realize now that some shows are like that, some shows are not. I did not handle the stress well. I was also very green. I did learn a lot about what not to do, how to tell story, how to break story. That job ended. And then I had a lovely 12-month break. And I got a new agent and a new manager. And I ended up I wrote on the TV show called The Client List. And then I went on to I wrote 2 seasons of that, 2 seasons of the freeform drama Shadowhunters. And then I went on to do 2 seasons of Tell Me a Story with Kevin Williamson from Scream and Dawson's Creek for CBS All-Access. And now I've had 2 seasons, almost 3 seasons now of All American Homecoming. In that time, I've pitched shows, I've sold some shows. I wrote 2 years ago, I wrote a movie for Sony, a rewrite on a movie for Sony. And then I began my book career, and that was kind of born out of, at the time, women's stories people weren't as interested. TV's obviously shifted, where we do have more of a, say they are a little more interested in what the stories we want to tell. At that time, it was a little trickier. And I just wanted to write some stuff that I was like still pursuing TV, still trying to get staffed, still trying to develop my own work, but I just needed a creative outlet. I started writing my first book. I ended up selling that in a 2-book deal. And it sold in 11 countries and was like just an incredible experience. Books are hard. And I always say, like, do both, because it's, you're always trying to juggle jobs and money and keeping it afloat. But I do love it. And the show that I'm on now is the best experience I've ever had in my career. If I could work on this show for the next 15 years until I retire to a cottage on the beach, I would. The most lovely people. My boss, Nkechi, Carol, is the greatest person alive. I think she must have cloned herself, because she has 3 shows on the air. But she really supports her writers, believes in her writers, lets us do our job, makes us better. That is how I would love to be as a showrunner when I, get there. But as a staff writer, I think she also, and we'll talk a lot about bosses who nurture their writers and mentor their writers. She's the gold standard. And I will tell one of my favorite stories about getting a staff writer job and being ready and prepared, because you never know when it's going to happen, because she's a perfect example. So that's a little bit about me. The staff writer, getting hired as a staff writer, I will not sugarcoat it. It's a lot harder these days. Like, I'm just going to say it, because I think if you want it, it happens all the time. I know writers getting staffed every day, every week. But it's also a lot harder to break in, so like, I think like, I think that's why you have to be really aggressive. You have to be really like prepared with your craft, and you have to be just ready to like hustle and make things happen. Back when I started, I would do these talks, or even I think these talks have gotten a little harder in the last few years, because the business has made it harder. And all the things that we're fighting for on the picket line are things that I'm going to talk to you about today, which is that, we're not hiring lower levels. Like, I teach writing as well. And I have so many writers I've like either worked with before or taught, who got that first job but can't get the second, or are almost there, like all the meetings, all the showrunners, but they're hearing the same line, which is like, well, we're just not hiring at that level. And so I'm really hoping, and that's why we're battling, the guild, right? The guild is battling so hard with the AMPTP to have a minimum staff hire, right? Because my first writer's room was 14 writers. I've been fortunate on most of my shows. The staffs aren't any smaller than 8 writers, 7 or 8 writers, but that's huge, right? I've never done a mini room, thankfully. I haven't done Netflix or Amazon or any of these like small short order shows, where you're only employed for like 12 weeks, a friend of mine, he's a high level showrunner, co-EP. He 1 year, like before he was at that level, worked on 4 shows in a year. Which is great for him, but how many people are in that demand that they're going to get 4 jobs in a year? So, for you all, the best thing to do, and obviously the thing that starts everything, is your script, right? Like, it comes down to the script. And it's been interesting to watch the business shift, because like, good isn't enough, and I worked with a lot of like writers who like, like they would like be like to me when I'd be like, oh, I'm working on a new pilot, and they're like, oh, did you sell it? I'm like, no, it's just like a sample. It's like a new thing for my agents. And they'd say, oh, that's cute. Like they were like, they couldn't imagine like writing a script, because you were like wanting to be, you wanted to show what you could do, or you wanted to show a different side of your writing, or you were like at the time I was on a soft cable drama, right? Like the client list was a soft cable drama. So, and I knew I wanted to be I write, Homecoming is not that, but like a lot of the stuff I write is darker, edgier. And so I had to write those scripts. And the thing that people always say, and I found it to be so true even in my own work, is all it takes is one script, right? all it takes is one great script. Like, yes, you want more things in your portfolio, like, you know, have a pilot, have a feature, have a short story. Like, you want those things to show you can do a lot, but that one script will change your career. And I didn't experience, like, I wrote good scripts, like they were good. They got me jobs, they got me meetings, but I finally wrote the great script, and that script I still use 4 years later. Like, it was like the script that, like, it's not a show people want to really can make, because it's like weird and different. And like, it's a very, like, I didn't use any of the, like, you know, structure things that I would tell you all about. Like, I broke all the rules, but I knew the rules. I knew what the show could be. And I really wrote it. And I said, I want people to read this and just say, I know this person can write, I have to meet them. And that's what it did. So I think, like, as you, like, write the things you're like passionate about. Don't listen to the noise of like, well, nobody's going to want this, nobody's going to want that. Like, write what you really, really like love, what you have to say, what you don't see out there. Because there is a voice. And when I was a staff writer, and I think I was a story editor, and do you all know the levels of writers in a writer's room? Does everybody know? And you could,
No.
No, because I'll go through it, because I think it's important to know, and we don't always discuss it. So in a writer's room, obviously staff writer is the lowest level. That's the level most of you would likely come in, unless it was a show you helped create, or, you know, you got some sort of, you know, they loved you so much they wanted you to be upper level. But so it's staff writer, and the definitions of like each of the levels in a writer's room are really more for like what you make and earn, and like your experience level, right? So that's like, so as a staff writer, and this is something else we're asking for, we've asked for this every year since the beginning of time, and we don't get it, but it's for staff writers to be paid for their episodes. So as a staff writer, you will come in, and let's say you were on All American Homecoming, you would come in and you would write a script just like me, but I would make $28,000 for my script and you would not. Which is unfortunate. You're doing the same work, you're making the same show, but it's just always been, it was always meant to be like, this is a learning position. So you still get a weekly salary, and it's a pretty good weekly salary. I think it's, I'm a little behind on what the increase is, but I want to say something like $3,500 a week. So that's a good starting salary. You know, you're doing okay. And again, hopefully you're working for more than 12 weeks. Our show's 7 months, 8 months. So you start as a staff writer, and then you go to story editor, and then you go to executive story editor, and then it's co-producer, producer, co-executive producer, and then executive producer, showrunner. So those are the titles. The issue we've also been having, and what we're fighting for, and I know I'll be talking about a lot of this, but it's important to understand where the business is, and hopefully not where it's going, but where we want to make it, you know, so that this isn't a career we can all have, because the way it's been going, it hasn't. What's been happening is they've been hiring maybe one staff writer, maybe, or a story editor, and then everybody else is at the upper level, or they hire like 3 or 4 staff writers and like 1 upper level. And so the jobs have been harder to get when you're in the staff writer level or the middle level. It's like upper levels, you know, it's still hard for us, but you know, we have the experience. And so the goal is that we hire more staff writers, more people to train. There will not be showrunners who know, like, I know people who have been doing this job as long as I have, or maybe a little less, who have never been on a set, like who've never gotten to produce an episode of television. For me, and I've been so fortunate in my career, from the time I was a staff writer to like now, I've always been on set. I've always produced my episodes, which, you know, if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to talk about it. It's one of my favorite parts. Like, I'm not one of those writers who like loves to stay on set, because, you know, I'd rather be writing or in the writer's room, but it is the most amazing experience to see what you put on the page. You know, like we did, you know, like my show's like baseball, you know, so like I write an entire like baseball storyline, and then like 3 weeks later we're on a baseball field. I don't know if any of you follow tennis, but we wanted to get a big guest star for my episode, and we got Coco Gauff, who's like one of the top tennis players in the world. And like, you know, so suddenly like I'm like, you know, I'm writing it, and then I'm like sitting on set, like, you know, talking to Coco Gauff and her mom about her tennis phenom, you know? So those are like the great things. And I think, but I do think, and this is like where, you know, I think a lot of the writers that give up or don't, you know, can't, I mean, it's hard. I'm not going to say it's hard. You have to juggle your personal lives, your work lives, your financial lives while still trying to pursue this career. I think it's worth everything and all the sacrifices I've made to do it. But I think it has to start with that script. And I think you have to get the work vetted, find writers groups, entered in contests. My whole career, I owed a contest, I will say. The first contest I entered that got me interested in TV was a screenwriter who was like raising money for his hometown. It was like, it was $50 to enter. The money was all going, it wasn't going to him. It was going to his hometown library. And I had to like beg my sister to like pay for it because I couldn't even afford the $50 for it. And, you know, I won like $500 and a final draft, but I won this connection to this writer, which was worth way more than that. And then I entered, you know, Warner Brothers. And then after I left that job, I couldn't get traction again. My reps had dropped me. It was like, I was like, and I wrote this new script and I like was getting meetings on the premise and the script, and it won Scriptapalooza, and it, you know, and then it got me more attention for this manager who's, you know, still my manager 10 years later. And then with my book career, I was like, you know, trying to get my book, you know, sold or read, and I wanted an agent, and I was with one of the biggest agencies at the time. I'd left UTA and I was with WME. And the agent there was like, I'll take a look at it. I'll read it. And then she liked it. She had notes and I did the notes, but then I didn't hear back from her. And, you know, everything is slow until it's not. Everybody's like, you know, they're busy. Like, why do they need to take on a new writer? So I entered it in a contest, and it was like, you know, it was like an international contest, and it was a finalist, and it got her to read it. And she like read the changes and she was like, I'm going to sell this book. So like the thing that we're constantly chasing, and this is once your script's in a great place and you feel really good about it, is building heat, right? Because like nobody in this town can trust their own opinion because they're like, I don't know if my bosses will like it. I don't know. Like, so a contest or somebody who's vouching for you is worth so much, which is, again, I used to place a lot more weight on contests. Now, like, I think some of them, you have to be careful because some of them are just money grabs, but there are still contests that will get you meetings with people, will get you wrapped, will get you, you know, not necessarily the jobs anymore, because those staff, like I said, those staff jobs are harder to come by, but they will get you in the door, and that's what you want. So I've talked a lot. And now I want to answer any of your questions. You can put it in the chat. You can ask it yourself. Feel free. This is your time to find out, and whatever information I can give you that will make your journey to becoming a staff writer, and hopefully getting your own show. The one other thing I will say is there has been this tendency I've noticed in some of the teaching that I do, and I do talks at other schools and universities, of people being like, well, I don't want to be a staff writer. I want my own show. And I promise you, you don't, at least at this level. I promise you that it is a corporation you're running. It is not a creative endeavor. So you think like, cause I used to think, oh, I'd love to be in charge, but like, it's like 5 a.m. phone calls from production telling you that the actor's sick with COVID and they can't come in. It is like the editor quitting, or, you know, the, you know, writer that you hired that you thought was great didn't turn in a great script. And so now it's your whole weekend rewriting this episode that shoots in 5 days. It's so much of the business. And I think if you don't have like the understanding of how the business works, like you'll falter, like, and you could end up like, you know, making, like, looking bad to your fellow writers who you want to hire you. This is the training ground. And I think people have gotten so caught up in the, like, because we have so many celebrity showrunners now, and it's like, you know, like there's more access and more information, but like really running a show is running a corporation. And like, you know, if you were going to go to, you know, Goldman Sachs, you wouldn't like walk in and be like, hey, here, I'm ready to be CEO. Like, you would be working on the floor and you would be learning. So I think, and like, you know, I think some of us are like, would I be ready today? Yes. But am I grateful that I've had that experience? Like, do I think I would have been ready before that? Yes. But I'm grateful for that experience. And so I think like some people get their chance soon and they rise to the occasion, but being a staff writer is a great training ground. Let me look at some of these questions. Hold on a second. Okay, great questions. Okay, Carla said, what contest would you recommend? I'll talk to Jonathan. I have a list of like all the contests that I put together that I really love, with the disclaimer that yes, they cost money. But I do think the list that I've created and cultivated over the years is a solid list with people who are still getting work. My rule of thumb is never pay over $100 for a contest. And you know, the ones that I list, I know who the people are who are running it, and it's vetted. And they are all contests that either promise an agent, manager, producer, or, you know, some sort of like tangible thing, or a financial prize too. So I will talk to Jonathan and see how to get out. I can email it, and I'm sure he can email out a list for all of you. And it's got some classes that I recommend. It's a whole thing, so that I put together just as a helpful tool for people. The Los Angeles thing, I think is like, I'm going to say yes and no. I think like COVID has helped change that. There's been some interesting things online. I don't know if anybody's followed it, about Zoom's new rules of service, saying they can record and that you give them creative, I don't know. That came out this week, which could be a legal nightmare for everyone. I think, yes, you can, until you can't, which is, I'll give you an example of my friend. She was an actress. We met on a message board like 12 years ago. And then she started writing, and she's made some wonderful short films. Her name's Brandy Nicole, and you can check, her films are great. She got one on HBO, and like, you know, like had, I think Malcolm Jamal Warner was in it, and the woman who played Dr. Bailey on Grey's Anatomy. And she kept writing. She got staffed. She was a staffed writer on Your Honor. And all of this she was doing all of this while she was, especially through Zoom and with COVID in the last few years, she became a writer's assistant and then got staffed, but she lived in Atlanta or Memphis, I think. So she was doing that all online. She would come to LA for meetings. She would, you know, she found a great manager, and she would come, and she was open to moving here. Right. So I think you have to be open to doing that. I really hope, and I remember when COVID hit and we went virtual at the time, I was developing and pregnant with the triplets. And so I was obviously not going anywhere. And like, I remember friends of mine were leaving, or friends of friends were leaving LA, and like their agents were like, totally go back to New York, go back to wherever, like live on a beach, you can do Zoom. And I remember saying to my husband, like, there's no way this is going to last. There's no, like, there's a sense of control that people want to have over you in the creative process. And so I do think, and I started to see that happen. But it like, there's still shows, like I was on a panel with the showrunners from a show called Good Trouble, and they said that they were taking meetings and they were losing writers when they said you have to come in. So I think it's going to be very dependent on the show. I think as the pursuit at the level all of you are pursuing, I don't think you have to move out here yet. I think get your scripts ready, win some contests, make some connections, set up a week and come out and meet some people and go to some mixers and join some, you know, there's some great, there's also, my friend has this great Discord group, and I'll have to remember to tell Jonathan to remind me. I don't have the link to it, but it's a great Discord group, and she runs it for aspiring writers. And she's a great TV writer who we took out a project together, because there is a great community here. And I would also say, join a writers group or writers classes, like UCLA. I teach one, you can check it out. It's called Genre Masters Online. But I'm not promoting my class, UCLA Extension, Script Anatomy. There's a bunch of different classes that you can check out that writers groups form from that. And the reason I say is, like, I taught for years, and at this one company, and what I loved before I started my own, I loved was the community and the connection. And like, people have hired writers from that, like people have become showrunners out of that class. They've hired writers out of that class. I just think that is like, and you can do that virtually, like all their classes are virtual. Making those connections are more important than moving to LA right now, because you know, and you might get on a show where, you know, like my show, I have to be in person. Like there's one writer who is able to, but, and it's hard to be virtual in a writer's room. Like, they'll allow it for health reasons or COVID reasons. We're trying to be inclusive with disability. We're not, but we're trying, as a, system. So they will do that. And there are still lots of shows that are doing virtual. I interviewed for one last year that I was like, oh my God, this sounds amazing. Like, you never have to go in. But I think the majority are shifting towards that. So it is something to be prepared for. Are writers' rooms, okay, that's a great question. Are writers' rooms generally hierarchical or not? Do lower level writers have less input, or does it depend on the attitude of the showrunner? So that's exactly what it is. It depends on the attitude. I've been in shows. I mean, I guess like most of the rooms I've been on, they're very, they've been very like open. Like, everybody has a say, sometimes to the detriment. Like, sometimes there was too much where it was like, okay, well, you have to respect the co-EP. Like, he's been doing this for 12 years. You've been here for 12 minutes. Like, let's just slow down. But I do think now, because I think the one good thing about writers' rooms being smaller is that every voice counts. Before, there used to be that advice of like, if you're a staff writer, don't say anything. Like, just listen. And like, now if you did that, someone would come to you and say, hey, you need to pitch more, or like, you need to like, so I think like that is very clear. Our room on Homecoming, everybody's idea there, the rooms get very small because, as writers, peel off to go produce their episode or write their episode. I wrote the 7th episode. I was running the writers' room. So I wrote the 7th episode of the season. We had 8 writers. So there was like, there was like me, the staff, the story editor, and the writer's assistant, and we broke the whole episode together. And so the writer's assistant he ended up writing an episode and is a fantastic writer, but he ended up like basically being another writer in the room because the room was so small. So I do think that like I think it's good to respect the hierarchy, because there are rooms like that. And I talked to a friend recently who was like, oh, I was in this room and it was like, whoa, like they were very surprised at how much the levels mattered. But I think it just depends on who the showrunner is. And I think you figure out, I think the first week you start on a show, like, pitch your good ideas, but also pay attention. And I think the best writers in a writer's room that succeed, watch the room around them, watch how people interact, watch it's a sociological experiment, right? Of like how people, and I found the writer's room very intimidating in the beginning. I'm from Texas. I'm used to the patriarchy. Like, I'm not used to like speaking up. Like, I wasn't, a writer years later called me, said I was a diva. And I was like, I mean, I guess I'm a diva when it comes to defending a story or pitching a story. I was like, I'll take that as a compliment. But in the beginning, I found it very like difficult, just because it goes so fast. It's like, it's like you come into a writer's room, it's like a new language, the way people break story, it can be so fast. But you learn, it's like a language. And I remember a staff writer, a girl that I, taught for like 3 years, she'd been in a bunch of my classes, got staffed on a show. And I saw her at a mixer and I was like, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. How's it going? And she's like, I hate it. And I was like, wait, what? And she's like, this is completely not. And she was a lawyer, right? So she was she'd been a lawyer for 6 years. And I was like, you're okay. You've only been doing this for 2 months. It's going to get better. It's going to get easier. And then I saw her 6 months later, loved it. And she's been on that show for like the next 3 years, 4 years. She's like produced her episodes. She's like a pro. And so I think like we have this idea, like, especially like, because we all love TV, we all love film, we all want to do this, that it's going to be like fun. And it is, but it's also a job. So I think like you have to like approach it where you go in and you're like, oh, right. Like some days are really fun and some days are just really hard, like it's funny though, because my husband, when I got this job, he was like, how I know that you like this job so much? And I was like, no. And he's like, you never complain. And I was like, oh, because like, it's like any job, you're going to have your coworkers that annoy you, the administrative stuff that's obnoxious. Like just because it's a creative endeavor doesn't mean it's not a job. So some days will feel like a job. And some days you're like, why did I want to do this? But then the days when you're in the room and the story is clicking and everybody's on the same page and you're watching an episode come together, you're like, oh, this is why I do it. Because you don't have, like, I worked a ton of day jobs. I did everything. Like there's nothing better. Okay. I live in LA. I think definitely. So Jawanda, you said you lived in LA, you did New York for 12 years and you loved it. I think that feeling, that sense of like, I don't know what to do next. I think you definitely need to get your scripts in some contests. And the reason I say that is all the reasons I said, but it also kind of tells you like where the script is. You know what I mean? Like even if it's like, you don't have to win the contest, but if you're placing in the top, if people are like, you're getting feedback and they're like, this is really good. Like, I think it's like, you know, or find people that you know and trust, or somebody in the business, like a producer, an actor, someone who reads your work and says, wow, you're ready. And then yes, the next step is finding a manager, right? And I will say, as managers, I always say before agents. And the reason I say this is, and that's not there's some good agents who will take on new clients, but the majority are not building careers. I just think, and I think we're going to see with the strike, I think there might be some agencies letting go of writers. I mean, you know, agents, which means writers. You know, we saw, you know, CAA buy, you know, ICM, like, you know, they're not interested in building writing careers because the money's not there for them to break the baby writer. We don't use baby writer anymore. Sorry. It's such a terrible term, but it's like ingrained in us to break the newer writers, right? The pre-WGA writers. So I think like finding the manager is great. I just think the one piece of advice about representation that I give every single writer, myself included, and I've made this mistake, is no rep is better than a bad rep. And the reason I say that is because if you get a bad rep who doesn't have a lot of connections or doesn't hustle or takes the one big idea you have and then it's over and they're like, well, we didn't sell this, sorry. Like, then you're done. And then you basically are kind of like, it's like being trapped in a marriage that, you know, a marriage where nobody loves each other. It's like, at least if you're on your own, you can be your own best advocate, right? You can do the hustle, you can do that. And that's tiring. But if you're with a rep who's not great, your work is just sitting on their desktop or their laptop and you're just waiting for the phone to ring. So I've had friends sign with like managers and I've been like, please don't sign with them. They're terrible. I know them. And it's hard because these managers are well known in the business and they look good and they do have successful clients and shows. But I'm like, but I know what they do. They like take all these new writers and then one or two hit and then the rest get like just shelved. Or they try to steer them in a way that they don't want to go. Like this wonderful writer was like a big sci-fi fantasy writer with like this friend of mine in my writers group. And they were like, this manager told her like, I don't think you should write this I think you should just write this as a straight drama. Don't write it as a fantasy. And I was like, what is he telling you? Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's because he doesn't know how to sell that. And thankfully she left him and got a better manager. And then she got staffed on a Marvel show. So I think like, you have to trust your own sense of who you are as a writer, who you want to be and where you want to go. So, and Jawanda, I don't know if you're in a, like, if you have a group of networking but that is where, and like, when I say networking, I just mean like-minded people, not even like, I'm not talking about like, cause networking always has that connotation of like, I need to like meet like people, like producers, and the people that are going to help you are the people who are like you, who are stuck, who are like, what do I do? And they're going to help you get that next thing. So I would definitely like, there's also a great website that I love that gives you a lot of information. They have classes, they have managers. It's called Done Deal Pro. And I recommend it a lot because it like it's $28 a year. So it's not a huge investment financially, but it also says like, so it lists like managers, agents, it has message boards. So it'll tell you about every agent and manager in the city. But it also has what's selling, right? What projects are selling. And it's more updated than like Variety or any of the other trades. And it'll tell you who their agents are, who their managers are, who their lawyers are. It's a great resource because then you know what people are buying, you know, the agents and managers that are people that are, you know, getting stuff done. And so it's something that like, because like this information, all this information is going to help you get staffed. This is what you need. The writers who are like, I don't know any of this, like it doesn't work that way. So I would say like, but I would say, and you can also, and this is like the advice that's like, I say do it. I don't know how often it works, but, oh yes. Done Deal Pro. It's funny. It's not a well-built website. Like it looks like something from the 90s, early 2000s, but it's very informative. I would also say cold queries can work. I don't think they always work, but if you can find like the manager's information, if they accept queries, that's the first thing you have to ask. Most agents don't, so I wouldn't even start there. But you know, some of the newer managers or bigger managers. And I think if you're very specific, and you have like a script that's gotten some attention, or you have a story that's interesting. There's a writer that I like mentored during COVID, a bunch of us did, and now he's got an overall deal at Sony. So he clearly learned how to do the game. But he was a really successful like rapper performer in San Francisco. And he decided he wanted to write, and like he met everyone, but he got his manager through literally just emailing him like, hey, here's the script. I went to UCLA. I did this. I used to be and like his manager's like, cool, send me something to read. And he signed him and done. You know what I mean? So I think also if you like have a really high concept script or something based on IP that you own, and you're like, hey, I'm going to send this to, and you write a killer query letter, like, like I always talk about when you're taking a meeting, you're meeting agents and they say, tell me about yourself. They don't want to hear where you went to school. I mean, it's fine, but like they don't want to hear that, you went to Harvard or you went to wherever, or you were a showrunner's assistant or writer's assistant, or, they want to know like your story. So like, I would always be like, I'm an identical twin. I was adopted. My father was in a crime gang in the 1960s called the Overton gang. Like they want to know you have stories to tell. So if you have that and you can craft that and send in a query letter, you never know. I feel like a lot of what I'm telling you today, it feels like a lot, but I think you do it all, right? It's like you have to throw everything at the wall because that one thing might stick. There is no, if someone tells you there is one path, they're lying. Like there's just not. So that's why you have to kind of like, you have all the opportunities, and none of it takes a long time. Okay, so maybe it'll take you a week to do queries and send off some emails about your script. Maybe it takes you a week to figure out what contests and when you're going to send it and which script is going to be ready. But that's part of the work after the writing is done. Let's see, hold on, let me scroll up. I want to see this question here, and then I'll answer the writer's room question. Is it beneficial to turn your scripts into another form of media to help gain interest? Absolutely. And that's not, look, and I mean, the days of like, just like, let's make a short film and then you'll get staffed or you'll get, you know what I mean? That's a lot harder, right? Or like web series, like there's just so much out there. But if you have the ability to do TikTok or Instagram or, Twitter, I don't know what it is anymore, but like, those two are like great options to get your name out there. I remember like, and this was years ago, obviously before I sold my first book, but I was joking with my sister. I wasn't online. I wasn't on Twitter, but I did say to my sister, I'm going to start just tweeting about writing. Like, just like, I wasn't going to tweet, like, I'm not tweeting politics. I'm not tweeting, but I was like, I'm going to tweet like about writing because that's like what I know and what I'm passionate about. And because I've heard that it can help you build a platform if you're trying to sell a book. And I wasn't done with my book yet, but I was close. And so flash forward like 10 months, literally like one of the editors from like Sweden that I sold my book to like referenced my Twitter. So I feel like, like as they like, please let us publish your book. We saw your fortune cookie that you posted and whatever. We want to make your dreams come true, whatever it was. So I think like that is a great way to get you like starting if there's a blog about something specific or cool that you're interested in, that you have something to say, like people seeing that you have a presence or you have a voice or you have something is so great. Like you just never know where that's going to come from. So I absolutely think that's a great idea. I think also if you have a book, if you want to write a book or you have a book and you want to turn it into screenplay, that's another great way to do it. Essays, like when I was coming in, when I was staffing, I came out of the Warner Brothers program, right? And I only had that one script I'd written that I'd gotten into that like Friday Night Lights, and the closer spec that I wrote in the program because they were having us write specs, but I did not have an original pilot. And overnight the business changed. You have to have an original. That's how you get staffed. So I was like suddenly behind the curve, like, oh my God, I don't even know how to write a pilot at this point, which, I said I was green, like I didn't even have a pilot. but I had written a bunch of essays about my family, and like my father was in a crime gang and he was a heroin addict, and it was like a whole thing. And I'd written all these like really dark essays, and that was the thing that got me all these meetings. So it doesn't, like, if you wrote a play, if you wrote some, you know what I mean? It can be other stuff as long as the writing is good and they see there's a story. So short stories right now are hot. Like Verve, I'm with Verve now. I think they sold like 3 or 4, like, you know, so I would say like, you know, whatever it is, like, obviously they're going to want to see a script, but those things can get you attention too. Like every time, like you should always have that script that's like surefire, but the second piece of material, when they say, what else do you have? It can be something else. I mean, you know, if they're open-minded and they're interested in storytellers, they're going to want it. Let's see. What is an average day in a writer's room, and what are the start and finish times, or is the later dependent upon work being completed? So that's a great question too. So, some hours are wild and long, not our room. So I'll just tell you about the room I'm in now. I've definitely been on the shows where we were like working till midnight and then back at 7, and that was when they're dysfunctional, but I've been lucky that I've only worked on like one of those. So our hours are very reasonable. We start at 10, the writer's room starts at 10. Which is great. I have to commute, so I have to leave at 8:30. That's fun. But we start at 10, the writer's room. So we're in by 10. The room starts promptly at 10, and then our room like goes, like we work from 10 to 12:30 straight. And we're pitching, you know, we're pitching on the episodes, whether it's the specific episode or the season arc. And then we break, we do like, this is not always like this is the first show I've ever done where we break from 12:30 to 2. So we get a 90-minute lunch break, which is amazing. And then we come back, and we're usually, I would be like between 2 to like in the early parts of the season, this will not happen when the strike's over, but in the early part of the season, it'd be like 2 to like 5:30, like, you know, like 3.5 hours of like full on is a lot. As the season kind of like gets busier and there's more, it was more like 6, we would break by like 6. We didn't have a lot of late days. I think maybe 3 times over the course of the season, like we had like some 7 o'clock, 7:30 days, 8 o'clock days. When you're on production, like, you know, we're lucky that our show films here in LA and we on the Warner Brothers stages. So, you know, your days are a lot longer than like, you know, call is 6:30 or 7 in the morning. You know, we wrap at like, you know, most days. I mean, some days they were a little, and then you shoot for 12 hours. So you have 12-hour days, but they're pretty reasonable. I think like most of the days of like showrunners making people work 15-hour days, you know, come in at 10, stay till midnight. That's changed. Like there were shows, and I worked on a show with a showrunner who kind of had that reputation, and he was like obsessive. He'd be like, what? And then he'd be like, it's 6 o'clock. Why didn't you tell me? And he'd like send us all home because he was like so worried that people were going to talk that he wasn't easy to work for. But the hours are, you know, they're reasonable, you know, and I do think like the other thing I try to always remind myself I mean, you know, they can be long days too, like when you're on set and stuff, is that you're not doing that for the rest of your life. Like you will work 5, 6, 7, 8 months, and then you're going to have time off because the season's over and you're either going to get another season or, you know, so I think like in the real world, nobody's like, people aren't like, that's just their job they go to forever, you know? But we do have those breaks in between. So, but I mean, it's reasonable. And if it's a good show, like those days go by so fast. Like I'll be like, I can't believe it's 5 o'clock already. Like most days, you know? So yeah, that's the, and then, you know, and then there is the other work that I should mention too. There's also the other work you have to do outside of your work, which is like the higher up you get, the more responsibilities you have. So sometimes I might have to read a script or do revisions on a script. Like if my boss is like, hey, can you rewrite some stuff? You have to watch cuts of the episodes and give notes on that. They don't really ask us to like weigh in except on our episodes. But that's, you know, knowing about editing and being able to like weigh in on what you like and what you don't and what needs to be cut so the episode isn't too long is also an important skill. That is not a skill that a lot of writers are getting on staffs these days, staff writers, but that's what we're working towards, because it's so, it just makes you a better writer. Cause like, sometimes like I remember like we, even when we're breaking episodes, like when we're like, oh, this episode is too long. And then we like look at the board, the writer's board, then we're like, this is a nice scene. It's a good moment, but like, it's going to be cut and we'll get rid of it. And there's even scenes that we'll film that I'll be like, we'll never use that scene. Like, I mean, just because, you start to see when you're in editing and what stays and what goes, what even needs to be shot. Oh yeah. So, and Jawanda, that's a good question. Like, what do you do when you produce an episode? Are there rewrites? Yeah, notes. So that's prep. Like, it's funny because pre-production, which is the week before you start shooting your episode, is actually one of my favorite things, because that's when you start to like see the episode really come to life. And so much of it is dependent on like a location, like, right? Like when the last episode I shot, it was like this big, finale, like it was the penultimate episode. So it was like a big baseball episode and a big dance number. And, and everybody was stressing about where are we going to shoot this, because there's not a lot of places to shoot baseball that aren't like being used. Like UCLA is like, no, you can't use our baseball field. We have games. And so like, it was like, every day, like locations, where are we going? And then we ended up having to like go out of town and like go to, go like an hour away and like get hotel rooms, because that was the only place we could go. And then it was like, well, do we minimize the baseball so we don't have to shoot as much there? And so there's all those conversations that have to happen. And then like, what are they wearing? And what is the, like, or availability of an actor? Like, sometimes like, one time we lost an actor, like, a guest actor who was on another show. We didn't have a contract with them. We would bring them back when we could, but then we had to rework this whole story. So those are the kinds of notes that like kind of come in, and the director comes in and they're like, I have some thoughts. And, usually it's a very collaborative place, at least on our show. So you're always like trying to figure that out. It kind of depends on, like, my boss is very hands-on. So, or my two bosses, there's two showrunners now, but, so they do a lot of the revisions from production. I've been on other shows where that's completely your responsibility, which is kind of crazy, especially if you're like a newer writer. You're like, wait, I have to do all this? Like, I have to rewrite these pages. And so sometimes you will get a lot more responsibility. Like they'll be like, okay, you had this meeting, the director doesn't think this works. Can you go rework it? And then you show it to your boss and they approve it. But it, and I think like, and I have like ADHD. And so I'm like constantly like taking notes and trying to stay on top of like, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. You have to like really be, I think as writers, we can be like, oh, I'm like creative. And that like when production, I like take so many notes. I'm like, I cannot miss anything. Cause you also know it's like, I mean, there's a whole, thing that's going on. And I did miss something once. I remember obsessing over it. Now I can't even remember what it was, but it was something where it was like, we had to reshoot something and it was easy. It was like a close up of something, but I was like, I dropped the ball, and you just feel so bad. You're like, oh my God, this is it. This is where I get fired and I never work again. So I think like just learning to be really organized in the pre-production part of it all is really helpful. And then Frank, I like this question about what a writer is doing when they're on set for a production. So it is, unless you're a team, and I don't know, is there any teams here? Nobody's a writing team? No. So, but if you're a team, then you go to set. Well, generally you'll go to set together unless you're behind, but usually it's just the one writer, like they'll send me to set to cover my episode, or, like one time on a show, we were filming in Canada. So one writer really liked being on set. So he would go a lot and he would stay a longer time. So, but when you're on set, you're like the expert, right? Because like the director, like, yes, the crew knows, but the crew's not like paying attention to like continuity or the fact that in this episode someone said this line about this thing. I worked on Shadowhunters was a sci-fi fantasy show, and it was very like, we had all these like, we had like swords, and we had like magical tattoos, and like, all these things that if you were just like, you're like, oh, whatever, doesn't matter, but like the fans are gonna zoom in on it. The fans are gonna like now everything can be screenshotted. So like it was really important. Like if it's like you're like, well, she's dead because that tattoo doesn't work, like light, like whatever the thing is. So it was so, and our bosses on that show they'd replaced another showrunner when they came in. they were like, oh, we don't normally send writers to set. And we were all like, please let us go. Like, we know how important it is. And fortunately, because the show was so big and technical, but it's even just something like a line reading, like our boss will do, it's called a tone meeting, right? And so it's the writer and the director and the showrunner sitting in a meeting, and the showrunner basically goes through every scene and says, this is really important. This is like setting, you know, and like kind of like just says like, this is what we need to convey. And it can just be a line, and it's like, oh, well, she's in love with this guy. She's like kind of acting like she's annoyed with him. Like, you know, like you're telling the director, like, could she try it like just a little less angry, or could he seem a little more excited about this like big game that they're having? Because sometimes the actors think they're doing that, and we want another take to try something else. So you don't, as a writer, it's actually not, you're not allowed to give the actors notes. But you can give it to the director. And I've never had a director that's like not been collaborative and like interested in what I have to, well, maybe not never, but most of the time they are appreciative. They know, you know, the show better than they do. All they want to do is like do a good episode so they get invited back, or that person tells other people they know, you got to hire this director. So you are, and then, you know, like the props people will come up to you and they want to know, like, do you like this sign we made? Or do you, you know, does this look like something the actor would have in, you know, props will be like, does this look like something the actor would have in their room? So you really are that like touch point for the writer's room. And so, you know, a lot of times you're just sitting, you know, sometimes I'm like, you're just sitting there, but then there's always something that comes up. Or one time we had an actress, and she was a beautiful actress, but she had on this outfit and it looked good in another scene, but we were on a different, like we were doing a different like camera angle, and she didn't look great, right? Like it wasn't like her best angle. And, you know, it's a very tricky thing to like say to, you know, and so suddenly the director's like, do we like this? And I was like, I don't know. Do we like it? Like, do I want to be the person who's, but we collaborated, and we just like called, you know, then you have to like decide, am I making this decision, or am I going up, you know? Cause it's like, and I was like, this is a conversation that's above me, because, you know, it's delicate. And we decided we changed her clothes. Like we wanted her, and also we were trying to service her. We didn't want her to not look good on camera. And it was just about the way the outfit fit and the angle. So those are the kinds of things you're constantly dealing with. So it is like a lot of problem solving, but it's also really fun. Like you're like I just like engages that storyteller brain that we're all wanting to use. And then there are usually, our show is different on All American or Homecoming, and I'm sure All American too, but on previous shows, sometimes there's a lot of rewriting that happens on set. Like, I mean, I've rewritten whole scenes on like before we shoot it. So I'm a prop, thank you for that. Like the prop master. Yes, our writers will always go to, I mean, our prop people will always go to us, and they're so good. They're the best. Like they are so on it. And I always really respect that. But yeah, sometimes you're rewriting. And I remember I worked on a show, and there was an actress, and she was an executive producer. So whatever she said went. And I mean, she would slash out full scenes, and she'd be like, and it'd be like 4 lines, and you're like, the episode's already short, you just cut it. And then you're like rewriting furiously. That stresses me out, because I'm a very like, you know, I'm not a comedy writer. I'm not, but you do learn to get better about it. The good thing about the show I'm on now is like, and I've never been on a show like this, so it's so gratifying. Like the words are like gospel. And so that's nice, right? Because the actors really respect it. And sometimes they'll be like, can I just change this like the to it? And I'm like, sure, like, yes, like, but you know, to change the whole meaning, or to change, if that happens, if someone's not happy, they usually don't do it, because now they've been told they have a certain amount of time, but you know, you'll say like, okay, like what, let's make this work for you. And so I think that's like really a really important skill you develop. I'll go till 12 if everybody's okay for that, since we started a little later. So we've got about 8 minutes. Does anybody have any other questions? Does anybody want to like pitch something? And like, I'll give it, I mean, I'm not putting anybody on the spot. You do not have to. I always hate when people do that, but what's another question? Anything else? You guys had great questions. Oh my goodness. And you can speak. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, you mentioned pitching in a room. So the writers pitch their episode ideas, or what do you mean pitching in a room?
So the way it works is, I mean, different shows operate a different in a different way. So in our room, you don't get like our room, like we kind of collaboratively come up with the episodes. Our boss like will be like, okay, so this is like what I want this episode to be about. And then you kind of pitch on that, like this episode is about like the one of our characters like joining a sorority, and then like we build the episode around that. But the way that a lot of writers' rooms work, and a lot of the rooms that I've been in, is if it's your episode, you're in charge, right? So if it's my episode, like I'm the one that's like, okay, so last night I was thinking, I had an idea about this storyline, I had an idea about that. Like they really do kind of empower you to be in charge. And so, and then like, so for my show, like we'll break the story, we like come up with the storyline together, but like I'm kind of like, and this is like, I'm obviously a co-EP, but like this is for the staff writers too. They come in and they run their, we call it running your board, because the board that, you know, we have with the stories on. So, and our, like every room's different. Some people use cards where they write on marker, you know, with markers and they stick them up. We're lucky we have like magnetic cards that we can write on with dry erase. So it's very easy to erase, which is nice. But like when you run your board, like by the time you're done breaking out the 6 acts, you like pitch it a bunch, and then your bosses come in and you pitch that whole episode to them. So I always think it's funny though, like as writers, like most of us are not like, I want to be center stage, right? Like most of us want to feel comfortable writing, but you do have to get used to presenting, because that is your job. Like a TV writer is not just, you know, sharing their ideas on paper. You have to learn how to pitch your ideas in a way that people are like going to respond. I've had to learn like to slow down because I talk fast, and I've had to learn sometimes like my brain goes so fast that like I'm 3 ideas ahead. And like my coworker who also had it, he would be like, Holly, I don't know what you're saying. And in my mind, I think I've been completely logical. And I'm like, oh, right, I was 3 steps ahead. So, but you do like in most rooms, you are as a staff writer, you are going to be in charge of your episode. And we had like 2 of the most amazing staff writers I've ever worked with on Homecoming, and obviously now they've moved up the ladder, so they're not staff writers anymore, but I was always in awe of how good they were, because if you walked into the room you wouldn't know they were staff writers. And one of them had worked as an assistant and a script coordinator for a long time, so she'd been in rooms. But the other one, her story, and like this is the story that I meant to say of like, you never know when your opportunity is going to present itself. She was right out of college. I think she had a couple other jobs, but she got hired as a production assistant on All American. And she's so fun. She's so smart. She's got great energy. I think she had a really great attitude. And so she was on set with my boss every day, you know, and then she was on set on Homecoming, and then they made the pilot for All American, and then they made the pilot for Homecoming, and she helped with that. And my boss was like, you know, I'd love to read your script, like, you know, like send me something. And she did, and she got hired. Like, so she like, you know, which, I mean, it's such a it's like such a rare story, but she was ready, you know, she had that opportunity, and she was ready for that. And then she was ready for the room. So I think it's just like preparing and doing all of that. James, thank you so much. I think James had to go. Yeah, you shared, yeah, I can share. Of course, I'll share my email. I'm very online. You can find me anywhere. And I'm always happy to like talk, or if you have questions. If you ever, I always offer this to writers. If you ever are approached by a manager, an agent, or someone, and you want feedback on who they are, who they might know, I always like to like say that, because it's so overwhelming, and we have this tendency to be like, oh my God, someone wants me. But you want to make sure you want them back, right? I saw someone, plant medicine. That's interesting. Do you want to share a quick log line before we go? You have, not to put you on the spot, and you can always just email me. And so I try to be careful about reading pitches, because that can be, you know, for your protection and mine. But I'm always happy to answer questions. I'm always like, you know, I teach, and so like I really do. I think if we don't mentor the next writers, like we're not going to have a business. And I know there's a lot of doom and gloom out there about like where writing is going, but I think stories are going to endure, and I'm not stopping, and I don't want you guys to stop. I really think like tell your stories, like put your work out there, and just like connect with as many people as you can who are doing this, because like I just think that it can be a lonely endeavor writing, and then you get in a writer's room and it's not, and you've got all these great people, but it's like getting that to that place. So I will reach out to Jonathan. I will we have time for probably one more question, but I'll reach out to Jonathan and I'll ask him if I can, you know, how I can send you, I'll send you all this like little book that I've put together with like my, you know, advice on classes, you know, mentoring, workshops, connecting with people, all of that, and contests, because I think like, again, it's a hustle. I won't lie. It's a hustle. I still hustle. I mean, I've been doing this for 12 years, 10, 11, 12. I don't even count anymore. It makes me feel old, but I've been doing this for a long time, and it's still a hustle at my level. So like, just know, like, I don't know if it's more comforting or less, but just know, like, once you get good at it, you keep doing it, and just put your work out there. Any final?
Can I say this? Because I actually met your boss. Well, I didn't meet her, but I was in a seminar at the Hollywood House for Essex, and she told that exact same story that you just told about the woman who was the PA, exactly the same way. So I do appreciate you, because it just seems like you really landed on a very great show with a very giving sort of showrunner boss, because I think she even said her writing assistant was someone who had sent her a message on Instagram.
Oh
so
yeah, actually that was our script coordinator.
Oh,
she ended up, yeah, she was just like, and it was funny because she's like the character, like, and this girl was, you know, she'd like gone to, she played college tennis, like the main character on our show. You know, she went to an HBCU, like the main characters on our show. And then she ended up in the writer's room with us. You know, she's a script coordinator, which is a very technical job as well. It's a very hard job. Like it's, but she would sit in the writer's room and we'd be like struggling. And then we'd like ask her a question and she would pitch like the exact thing that wasn't just like a good moment for the scene, but was like a good moment for the episode. It would become like this. And so, I mean, not everybody can have that kind of, you know, it's going to have that specificity, but finding those people, and like, you know, her NK's assistant, Nikechi, but NK's her assistant, like, you know, has been with her for a long time, and she wrote her first episode and produced it of All American. So, you know, there's a lot of writers that give back, but like then there's writers like that, and that's what I aspire to do. So when I agree to do things like this, I'm here for you all. I'm happy to help. Like reach out, like don't go through it alone. Like if there's a question about the business, about whatever you're struggling with, reach out. I'm like, and if you don't hear back from me, reach out again, because I have identical triplets. So if you don't hear from me, it's only because my life is wild. And you know, I always say to people, I used to be the person who responded within 20 minutes. Now sometimes it can take me a week, but I'm always here. And I want to help you, and I hope, you know, good luck on your staff writing journeys and your writing journeys. And I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I will hopefully hear from you all soon. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Thank you for everything. You've been wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Of course. Have a great day and enjoy your weekend. Bye.
Thanks, Holly.